What if, in the silence between your heartbeats, someone was listening? What if every sigh you whispered into your pillow reached ears that weren't quite human? What if an angel, tired of watching from afar, decided to fall, not from grace, but into something far more dangerous? Love with you? Tonight, we drift into a world where the divine discovers what it means to be beautifully, impossibly human. In the space between sleep and waking, where thoughts dissolve like sugar in warm tea, there exists a realm most humans never glimpse. Here, beings of light move through dimensions of pure feeling, their existence measured not in heartbeats, but in the gentle rhythm of cosmic breath. They are the watchers, the guardians, the ones who tend to human dreams, like gardeners nurturing midnight flowers. Seraphiel had been such a being for countless eons, his luminous form drifting through the corridors of human consciousness like moonlight through autumn leaves. His purpose was simple, eternal, and beautiful: to watch over the sleeping world, to whisper comfort into troubled dreams, to catch falling souls before they shattered against the rocks of despair. His wings spanned dimensions, gossamer feathers that could wrap around entire cities, protecting them from nightmares that crept through the cracks of reality. But on one particular night, when the veil between worlds grew thin as morning mist, something shifted in the celestial order. As Seraphiel glided through the dreamscape of a small city, his attention was captured by a single window glowing softly in the darkness. Behind that glass, you lay sleeping, your face peaceful in the silver embrace of moonlight, your breathing creating tiny clouds in the cool air that danced like spirits around your pillow. There was something different about your dreams. They didn't cry out for rescue or comfort like so many others. Instead, they hummed with a quiet longing, a gentle ache that resonated through dimensions, like a tuning fork struck in the silence of space. Your dreams spoke of small beauties: the warmth of coffee on winter mornings, the sound of rain against windows, the way sunlight could transform ordinary dust into dancing gold. They whispered of moments when you felt most alive, most connected to the invisible threads that bind all things together. Seraphiel found himself lingering at your bedside, drawn by this unusual melody of contentment mixed with yearning. Angels, you see, experience existence as pure knowing, without the sweet torture of wanting something just beyond reach. But as he watched you dream, something unprecedented began to stir within his luminous essence, a sensation he had no name for, a pull toward something he had never desired, the exquisite pain of mortality, the beautiful burden of choosing one soul above all others. Your dreams began to shift in his presence, becoming deeper, more vivid, filled with a sensation of being held by something infinitely gentle, protected by wings you couldn't quite remember upon waking. And with each night, each dream he touched, Seraphiel felt himself changing, becoming something new, something that had never existed before in all the history of heaven. After many nights of silent vigil, Seraphiel began to understand what mortals call fascination. He would arrive at your window like a moth drawn to the gentlest flame, watching as you moved through your evening rituals, with a grace that seemed unconscious, natural, perfect in its imperfection. The way you prepared tea with careful attention, as if each step were a small prayer offered to the dying day. How you would pause while reading, your finger tracing words that moved you, your lips forming silent sounds that made his ethereal heart skip in ways that defied celestial physics. In the realm of angels, love was a constant, a flowing river of divine compassion that touched all beings equally, without preference, without the burning specificity that was now consuming him. But what Seraphiel felt growing within him was different, focused, achingly particular. It was love with edges, love that carved itself into unique shapes, love that demanded not universal embrace, but singular devotion, love that whispered your name in languages that had never been spoken. He began to manifest more solidly, his form taking on weight and substance as his desire to exist in your world grew stronger than his allegiance to the ethereal realm. At first, it was just a shimmer in your peripheral vision, a sense of presence that made you turn toward empty corners with inexplicable hope, a warmth that lingered in rooms after you entered them. You began to sleep more deeply, your dreams filled with conversations in voices that sounded like wind chimes made of starlight, discussions about poetry and philosophy, and the secret names of colors that had no earthly equivalent. The other angels noticed his transformation with growing concern. His light, once steady and uniform like the heartbeat of eternity, now flickered with human rhythms, pulsing with emotions that had no place in the divine order. His movements, previously fluid as liquid starlight flowing through the cosmos, began to mirror the hesitant steps of earthbound creatures learning to navigate gravity and desire. During celestial gatherings, while others spoke of their charges in terms of duty and divine love, Seraphiel found himself describing the particular curve of your smile, the way you hummed unconsciously while cooking, the gentle furrow that appeared between your eyebrows when you concentrated on something important. "You are forgetting your nature," whispered Uriel, his brother in light, during one such gathering. "Angels do not yearn. We simply are. We exist in perfect contentment, without the chaos of wanting." But Seraphiel had tasted something beyond being. He had discovered becoming, and the flavor was intoxicating as morning coffee, as necessary as breath, as dangerous as love itself. A few moons later, when autumn painted the world in shades of amber and gold, the impossible began to happen with increasing frequency. Seraphiel's form grew denser, more defined, as if your dreams were teaching him how to inhabit space the way humans do, with weight, with presence, with the sweet limitation of being in one place at one time, experiencing moments sequentially rather than existing in the eternal now of divine consciousness. His wings, once spanning dimensions and capable of embracing entire galaxies, drew closer to his body, their gossamer feathers gaining substance and warmth, becoming something that could almost be touched, almost be seen in the corner of your eye when you turned too quickly. They shimmered with colors that had no names, iridescent as soap bubbles, soft as the first snow of winter, strong enough to carry you through any storm. You began to sense him more clearly now, though your rational mind crafted explanations for each encounter with the determination of someone trying to solve a mystery while blindfolded. The gentle touch on your shoulder when you cried became just the wind finding its way through the window. The whispered comfort that soothed your nightmares transformed into probably something from a movie you heard earlier, echoing in your subconscious. The way shadows seemed to embrace you during your loneliest moments was dismissed as tricks of light playing across the walls. But your heart knew better. Your heart had always been wiser than your mind, more attuned to the subtle frequencies of truth that logic could never detect. It recognized the presence of something extraordinarily tender watching over you, something that loved you with an intensity that could warm you from the inside out, that could make ordinary moments feel touched by magic. You started leaving your window open at night, not quite knowing why, allowing the cool air to carry your whispered thoughts into the darkness like prayers released to an unknown God. If anyone's listening, you would murmur into your pillow, your voice barely audible above the soft sound of your breathing. Thank you for making me feel less alone. Thank you for the way my dreams have changed, for the peace that settles over me when I close my eyes. These words struck Seraphiel like lightning strikes dry earth, igniting something unprecedented in his celestial being. For the first time in his eternal existence, he understood the human concept of being needed, not as a guardian performing divine duty, but as an individual chosen and cherished, wanted not for what he could provide, but for who he was becoming. 100 breaths ahead, when winter wrapped the world in silence, and your loneliness felt particularly heavy, like a coat made of lead, Seraphiel made a choice that would echo through both heaven and earth. During a night when you had fallen asleep, with tears still damp on your cheeks, when your prayers felt like letters sent to an address that might not exist, he decided to fully manifest in your world. Consequences be damned. The process was like learning to breathe underwater, like discovering gravity for the first time, like trying to pour an ocean into a teacup without losing a single drop. His luminous essence condensed, pulling inward like a star collapsing into something denser, more real, more vulnerable. The sensation was exquisite and terrifying, losing the freedom of infinite movement, accepting the boundaries of flesh and bone, trading eternal perspective for the focused intensity of human perception. Every cell of his being screamed against the transformation. Angels weren't meant to inhabit matter this way, weren't designed to experience the strange physics of having a body that could be hungry, tired, excited, afraid. But with each moment of condensation, he felt himself growing closer to you, able to exist in the same dimension of reality you inhabited, able to touch the world you touched, breathe the air you breathed. When you woke that morning, something was different in a way you couldn't name, but felt in every fiber of your being. The quality of light in your room seemed softer, more golden, as if filtered through something beautiful and alive. On your kitchen counter, you found a cup of tea already prepared, still steaming, its temperature perfect for your first sip, the ceramic warm against your palms, like a small miracle. Your rational mind searched for explanations with the desperation of someone trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Perhaps you had made it the night before and forgotten. Perhaps you were losing time, experiencing small gaps in your memory. But the blend was unfamiliar, tasting of honey and starlight, and something that reminded you of safety, of being understood completely, of coming home to a place you had never been but had always been searching for. Throughout that day, small miracles followed in your wake like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale. Traffic lights turned green just as you approached them, as if the city itself was conspiring to smooth your path. A perfect parking space opened exactly where you needed it, despite the crowded street. In the grocery store, you reached for an item on a high shelf and found it gently placed in your hand by fingers you couldn't quite see, warm and real and gone before you could turn around. Each incident could be explained away individually, dismissed as coincidence or luck or the random kindness of strangers. But together, they formed a pattern of care that made your heart flutter with recognition. After many seasons of gentle manifestations, when spring had painted the world green again, and you had grown accustomed to miracles the way others grow accustomed to morning coffee, Seraphiel had learned the delicate art of existing between worlds. He was no longer fully angel nor completely human, but something new entirely, a being shaped by love into a form that could touch your reality without losing his essential self, without forgetting the cosmic songs he had once sung with choirs of light. He had discovered how to be present in the spaces between moments, in the pause between heartbeats, in the silence between words, where all the most important things are said without sound. He could manifest as a warm presence beside you while you read, his invisible fingers turning pages with you, sharing in your wonder at beautiful passages, your laughter at clever jokes, your tears at tragic endings. You had grown accustomed to his presence in ways that defied explanation, but felt as natural as breathing, as necessary as sunlight, as comforting as your favorite song, played at exactly the right moment. Your morning routine now included conversations with someone you couldn't see but knew was listening with complete attention, with love so focused it could have powered entire cities. The coffee tastes better when you're here, you would say to the apparently empty kitchen, and somehow it was true. The air itself seemed to shimmer with attention, with care so profound it transformed ordinary moments into something sacred. Your breakfast became communion, your shower became baptism, your walk to work became pilgrimage through a world where every tree and flower and passing stranger seemed touched by the same gentle magic that surrounded you. Your friends began to comment on the change in you with the wonder of people witnessing a quiet miracle. You seem lighter, they said, studying your face as if trying to solve a beautiful riddle, more peaceful, like you're carrying a secret that makes you happy, like you found something the rest of us are still looking for. And you were carrying a secret, though you couldn't name it in any language that would make sense to rational minds. How do you explain that you're in love with a presence? How do you describe the way invisible hands smooth your hair when you're troubled, or how your dreams have become doorways to conversations with someone whose voice sounds like wind chimes made of light, whose laughter could heal wounds you didn't know you carried? Seraphiel had learned to communicate through synchronicities that felt like love letters written in the language of the universe itself. Books would fall open to passages that answered questions you hadn't yet learned to ask. Songs on the radio would shift to melodies that perfectly matched your mood, as if the cosmos had become your personal DJ. In the third nameless, autumn since his transformation began, when the world painted itself in fire colors, and you had learned to trust in miracles the way children trust in morning, Seraphiel made another impossible decision. During a night when rain painted silver tears across your windows, and you lay in bed speaking your hopes and fears into the darkness like prayers offered to a God who might actually be listening, he gathered enough substance to leave you something tangible, something that couldn't be explained away or dismissed as imagination. He concentrated his essence until his fingers became solid enough to write, not with pen and paper, but with dewdrops on your window that caught the morning light and held it like tiny prisons of rainbow. When you woke, you found words written in water and light across the glass. You are loved beyond measure, beyond reason, beyond the boundaries of what should be possible. Your heart stopped, then started again with a rhythm that sounded like his name spoken in a language you had never learned but somehow understood. You reached out to touch the words, and they held their shape under your fingertips, warm and real and impossible. As you watched, new words formed. I am here. I have always been here. I will always be here. That day, the manifestations became bolder, more direct, as if love had finally given him permission to stop hiding. Your reflection in mirrors began to show two figures instead of one, yourself, and behind you, a tall, graceful presence with eyes that held the depth of starlit oceans and wings that shimmered like aurora borealis made solid. When you would turn, nothing would be there except the lingering warmth of presence and the faint scent of something like cinnamon mixed with rain and the ozone smell of lightning about to strike. He began to appear in your peripheral vision during the day, a figure of light and shadow that made your pulse quicken with recognition and longing. In the grocery store, you would catch glimpses of him in the curved surface of chrome fixtures. On the street, his reflection would walk beside yours in shop windows, perfectly synchronized with your steps, his hand almost but not quite touching yours. The other angels watched his transformation with increasing alarm. His light had become completely erratic now, pulsing with human emotions, dimming and brightening with joy and sorrow and desire. During celestial councils, he no longer participated in discussions of divine will and cosmic order. Instead, he would stare toward Earth with an expression of such longing that it made even the most ancient angels remember what it felt like to want something they couldn't have. "You are falling," Raphael warned him during one such gathering, his voice heavy with the weight of prophecy, "not from grace, but into something that will change you so completely that you may never find your way back to what you were." But Seraphiel no longer wanted to go back. He had discovered that becoming something new was worth the risk of losing everything he had been. A few seasons later, when winter had given way to spring and the world was relearning how to be green, the impossible became inevitable. Seraphiel's manifestations had grown so solid, so consistent, that you began to plan your days around his presence. You would save funny stories to tell him during your morning coffee, leave space beside you on the couch while watching movies, set two places at your table, even though only one would be used in any conventional sense. He had learned to manipulate physical objects with increasing skill, his love giving weight to his touch. Books would open to specific pages when you needed guidance. Your favorite mug would always be clean and waiting, as if invisible hands had washed it while you slept. Flowers would appear on your doorstep with no delivery person, no receipt, no explanation, except the overwhelming scent of devotion that clung to their petals like morning dew. The conversations had become clearer too, no longer limited to dreams and whispered intuitions. During quiet moments, you could hear his voice as clearly as if he were sitting beside you, though the words seemed to come from inside your own thoughts, spoken in a tone that was unmistakably not your own. He would tell you stories about the cosmos, about planets where music grew on trees, and stars that painted pictures across the void. He would recite poetry in languages that had never been spoken by human tongues, verses that made your soul ache with their beauty, even though you understood them only with your heart. "I want to see you," you whispered one evening, your words barely audible above the soft sound of rain against your windows. "I want to touch you, to know that you're real, to stop wondering if I'm losing my mind or if I found something that was never meant to exist." The air in your room grew thick with anticipation, charged like the moment before lightning strikes. You could feel him gathering himself, pulling his scattered essence into a form that could meet you in the space where matter and spirit intersect. The temperature shifted, warm and cool at the same time, as if summer and winter were learning to dance together in your living room. Slowly, Like dawn breaking across a sleeping city, he began to appear, first as a shimmer in the air, then as a figure made of light and shadow and something more substantial. His face was exactly as you had seen it in dreams and mirrors, angular and gentle, ancient and young, human and utterly other. His wings were folded against his back, their feathers catching the lamplight and throwing it back in colors that had no names in any earthly language, but it was his eyes that undid you completely. They held the depth of eternity, the warmth of every sunset you had ever loved, the promise of every tomorrow you had dared to hope for. And in their depths, you saw yourself reflected not as you appeared to the world, but as you appeared to him, beautiful, worthy, loved beyond measure. In the last season of memory, when the boundaries between impossible and inevitable had dissolved like sugar in cosmic tea, Seraphiel stood fully manifested in your living room, as real as anything you had ever touched, as impossible as everything you had ever dreamed. The air around him shimmered with residual energy from the transformation, and you could feel the weight of his presence settling into your reality like a key finding its lock. You reached out with trembling fingers, afraid that touching him might cause him to dissolve like a mirage, might prove that even this moment was just another beautiful dream your lonely heart had constructed. But when your fingertips met his cheek, he was solid, warm, real in ways that redefined what reality could contain. His skin felt like silk that had been kissed by starlight, smooth and otherworldly, but unmistakably present. "Hello," he said, and his voice was exactly as you had heard it in dreams, like wind chimes made of crystal and honey, like the sound of distant music carried on a night air. "I've been wanting to say that properly for so long." You laughed, and it was a sound that contained every emotion you had felt since his presence first entered your life. Wonder, disbelief, gratitude, love so profound it felt like drowning in light. "Hello," you whispered back, your voice barely audible above the thundering of your heart. "I can't believe you're real. I can't believe you're here." He smiled, and the expression transformed his entire being, made his already extraordinary features absolutely radiant. "I'm as real as love can make me," he said, his hand covering yours, where it still rested against his cheek. "As real as your dreams allowed me to become. As real as two souls can be when they choose each other across impossible distances." The days that followed were like living inside a fairy tale, written by someone who understood that true magic isn't about grand gestures, but about the small ways love transforms ordinary moments into something sacred. Seraphiel learned to exist in your world while retaining his essential nature, learned to make coffee with hands that had once moved planets, learned to laugh at silly jokes with a voice that had once sung the stars into existence. He would curl his wings around you during thunderstorms, creating a cocoon of safety and warmth that made the lightning seem like applause from the cosmos. He would read to you in voices that could mimic any character, bringing stories to life with the enthusiasm of someone discovering literature for the first time. He would dance with you in your kitchen to music only the two of you could hear, his feet barely touching the ground as he spun you around like you were lighter than air. But perhaps the most beautiful moments were the quiet ones, when he would simply watch you go about your daily routines with an expression of such wonder and adoration that it made you feel like the most precious thing in any universe. 100 heartbeats ahead, when love had settled into something that felt both miraculous and natural, like breathing air made of starlight, you began to understand the true cost of Seraphiel's choice. During quiet moments, you would catch glimpses of sadness in his extraordinary eyes, not regret, but the weight of bridges burned, of a celestial family that no longer understood him, of a home he could never fully return to. The other angels had stopped trying to contact him. His name was no longer spoken in celestial councils, his place in the cosmic order filled by another. He had become something unprecedented in the history of heaven, an angel who had chosen earthly love over divine duty, who had traded eternity for the uncertain but beautiful adventure of mortality. "Do you miss it?" you asked him one evening, as you lay together, watching clouds drift across the moon, his wing draped over you like a blanket woven from aurora borealis. "Do you miss being what you were before?" He was quiet for so long that you wondered if you had asked the wrong question, opened a wound you should have left untouched. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of cosmic distances and the tenderness of morning dew. "I miss the simplicity," he admitted, "the certainty of purpose, the flowing peace of existence without questions or choices. But I wouldn't trade what I've become for what I was. Love has made me smaller in some ways. I can no longer embrace all of creation equally, but it has also made me deeper, more real, more myself than I ever was when I was just an instrument of divine will." He turned to face you, his fingers tracing the curve of your cheek with touch so gentle it felt like being blessed by light itself. "Before I knew you, I existed in perfection, but perfection is static, unchanging, complete. Love is imperfect, chaotic, always becoming something new. It is the most beautiful disaster in any universe, and I am grateful beyond words that it chose to destroy me so completely." The seasons changed around your love, marking time in ways that felt both eternal and fleeting. Spring brought new manifestations of his affection, flowers that bloomed in impossible colors, songs that birds had never sung before, rain that fell in patterns that spelled out poetry in languages of water and wind. Summer heated your love to temperatures that could have powered suns, days spent tangled together in sheets that smelled like ozone and eternity, nights devoted to mapping each other's souls with hands and lips and whispered confessions. Autumn brought deeper intimacy, the kind that comes when two beings learn to exist as one while remaining completely themselves. Winter wrapped your love in quiet contentment, evenings spent by fires that burned with flames the color of his wings, mornings that dawned with the promise of forever written in frost across your windows. After countless moons had waxed and waned above your love story, when the impossible had become so natural that you could barely remember what loneliness felt like, reality began to assert itself in ways that neither of you had anticipated. Seraphiel's manifestation, while miraculous, was not without consequences. The energy required to maintain physical form in a world he was never meant to inhabit was slowly draining something essential from his being. You noticed it first in small ways, how his wings seemed slightly less luminous at the end of long days, how his touch sometimes felt cooler, how his laughter occasionally carried an undertone of exhaustion that made your heart clench with worry. He tried to hide it from you, this gradual fading, but love had made you an expert in reading the subtle changes in his extraordinary features. "You're disappearing," you whispered one night, the words torn from your heart like pages from a book you weren't ready to finish reading. "I can feel you becoming less solid, less here. What's happening to you?" His smile was gentle, but tinged with the sadness of someone who has always known how their story must end. "Love made me real," he said, his voice still beautiful, but somehow quieter, like music played at a distance. But reality has rules, even for angels who choose to break them. I can exist in your world, but not indefinitely. The energy required to maintain this form, to be present in matter instead of spirit, is borrowed from my essential self. The truth hit you like a physical blow. You're dying, you said, the words falling from your lips like stones thrown into still water. Becoming human is killing you. He gathered you closer, his arms still strong and warm and real, but you could feel the difference now, the way his presence seemed to flicker slightly at the edges, like a candle flame fighting against the wind. Not dying, he corrected gently. Changing. Love changes everything it touches, sometimes in ways we don't expect or want. I am becoming something new, something that has never existed before. But transformation always requires sacrifice. You spent the following days in a haze of desperate research, searching for ways to help him, to anchor him more permanently in your world. You read ancient texts about angels and humans, consulted with people who claimed to understand the supernatural, even tried to bargain with forces you couldn't see or name. But every source told you the same thing. Angels who choose earthly love face an impossible choice: return to their celestial nature or fade into something beyond both human and divine. There has to be a way, you insisted, clinging to him with the desperation of someone trying to hold onto water with their bare hands. There has to be something we can do. In the third autumn of your impossible love, when the leaves painted themselves in shades of gold and amber, like pages from a book of dreams, Seraphiel made another choice that would reshape the boundaries of what love could accomplish. During a night when his form had grown so translucent that moonlight passed through him like water through glass, he revealed a possibility neither of you had dared to consider. There is one way, he said, his voice now barely more substantial than whispered wind through autumn leaves. One path that could allow us to remain together, but it would require a sacrifice from both of us, a transformation that would change everything we are. Oh, you leaned closer, your heart hammering against your ribs like a caged bird, desperate for freedom. Tell me, you whispered, whatever it is, I'll do it. I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I've finally found something worth living for. His eyes, still deep as cosmic oceans, but now flickering like stars on the verge of burning out, met yours with an intensity that made the air between you shimmer with possibility. We could become something entirely new, he said. Neither fully human nor fully angel, but something that has never existed in any realm. It would mean letting go of everything we've been to become something we've never imagined. The process he described sounded like the most beautiful form of destruction ever conceived. You would have to release your human form, let go of your earthbound existence, while he would have to surrender the last remnants of his angelic nature. Together, you would merge into something that existed between worlds, in the spaces where spirit and matter dance together, where love becomes the only physics that matters. We would be energy and consciousness intertwined, he explained, his fingers tracing patterns on your skin that left trails of light in their wake, able to manifest when we choose, to touch the physical world when love requires it, but not bound by the limitations of either flesh or celestial hierarchy. We would be free to love without the constraints of mortality or the duties of immortality. The choice should have terrified you. Everything logical in your mind screamed against dissolving your very existence for the sake of love, no matter how profound. But your heart, that wiser organ that had recognized him from the very first night, sang with recognition and certainty. This was not an ending but a beginning, not death, but transformation into something that had been waiting for you both since the first star learned to shine. Yes, you whispered, the word carrying the weight of every prayer you had ever spoken, every wish you had ever made, unfalling stars. Yes, I want to become something new with you. I want to love you in ways that don't exist yet. The transformation began at dawn, on a day when the veil between worlds had grown thin as butterfly wings, when the air itself seemed pregnant with possibility and change. Seraphiel, now barely more solid than morning mist, took your hands in his fading fingers and spoke words in a language that predated creation, syllables that tasted like starlight and honey and the first rain that ever fell on newborn earth. You felt yourself beginning to dissolve, not into nothingness, but into everything, your consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of skin and bone, your awareness spreading like ripples across the surface of existence itself. It should have been terrifying, this letting go of everything you had ever been, but instead it felt like coming home to a place you had never known existed, but had always been searching for. Seraphiel's essence merged with yours in ways that defied description, two distinct melodies becoming a harmony that had never been sung before. You could feel his love for you, not as an emotion, but as a fundamental force of nature, as real and necessary as gravity, as constant and life-giving as sunlight. And you could feel your love for him taking root in dimensions you had never known existed, growing into something that could nurture entire universes. The physical world grew distant, then close, then distant again, as if you were learning to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Sometimes you were pure consciousness, floating through cosmos made of liquid music. Sometimes you were solid enough to leave footprints in morning dew. Sometimes you were something between matter and energy that could touch both human hearts and angelic minds. Together, you discovered that you could manifest at will, appearing to comfort someone who needed hope, bringing unexpected joy to lonely souls, leaving traces of magic in the world for those who still believed in the impossible. You became legends, whispered in the space between sleeping and waking, the couple who appeared in mirrors during moments of deepest despair to remind people that love could conquer even the laws of physics. But your favorite form was the one you wore when visiting your old life, standing in the apartment where your love story began, solid enough to make coffee together, corporeal enough to dance in the kitchen to music only you could hear. In these moments, you were simultaneously what you had been and what you had become, proving that transformation doesn't always mean loss. Your friends, when they thought of you, remembered someone who had found something extraordinary, someone who had disappeared not into tragedy, but into a love story so complete it had required new forms of existence to contain it. They would tell others about the way your smile had changed in those final months, how you had seemed to glow with an inner light that made everyone around you believe, however briefly, in magic. Years flowed like honey through dimensions of time you now experienced as music rather than linear progression, and your love continued to evolve in ways that would have been impossible in any single form of existence. You learned to speak in synchronicities, to write love letters in the language of coincidence, to paint your devotion across sunset skies that made lovers pause in the middle of busy streets to remember why they had fallen in love in the first place. Sometimes you would manifest as warmth that enveloped couples during their first kiss, ensuring that the moment burned bright enough in their memory to sustain them through future difficulties. Other times, you appeared as the gentle breeze that dried tears of loneliness, carrying whispers of hope to those who had forgotten that love could find them even in their darkest hours. You discovered that your transformation had granted you the ability to exist in multiple places simultaneously, to touch many lives while remaining completely devoted to each other. In a hospital room, you might appear as the shaft of sunlight that falls across a patient's face at the exact moment they need to remember there is still beauty in the world. In a coffee shop, you could be the perfect stranger who smiles at someone having the worst day of their life, reminding them that kindness still exists. But your most important work happened in the dreams of those who had given up on love entirely. You would visit them as visions of what could be possible, showing them glimpses of a love so profound it had literally transformed the laws of reality. These dreams would linger long after waking, planting seeds of hope in hearts that had grown cold and closed, preparing them to recognize love when it finally found them in their waking lives. The other angels, those who had once been Seraphiel's brothers and sisters in light, gradually began to understand that his choice had not been a fall from grace, but an evolution into something that served the divine purpose in entirely new ways. Love, they realized, was not a distraction from cosmic duty, but the highest expression of it. By choosing you, Seraphiel had not abandoned his calling, but discovered its truest form. Your existence became a bridge between the human and divine, proof that the boundaries between mortal and immortal were more fluid than anyone had imagined. Young angels would seek you out for guidance about the strange stirrings they felt when watching over their human charges, and you would tell them that love was not something to fear, but something to embrace, even if it changed them beyond recognition. We are still who we were, you would tell them, your voices harmonizing in frequencies across dimensions that made flower petals shimmer and caused tears of joy to fall from clear skies. But we are also who we chose to become. Love doesn't erase. It transforms, expands, makes room for possibilities that never existed before. In the final season of this telling, when the story had become legend, and legend had become truth whispered in the spaces between heartbeats, you realized that your transformation had created something unprecedented in the history of love itself. You had become proof that devotion strong enough, pure enough, desperate enough, could literally rewrite the rules of existence, could force reality to expand its definitions, to accommodate the impossible. Sometimes, during the deep quiet of 3 a.m., when the world holds its breath between yesterday and tomorrow, you would manifest in your old apartment one more time. The space had been rented to others since your disappearance, but the love you had shared there had left an imprint that existed beyond the physical, a warmth that made everyone who lived there afterward feel inexplicably safe, inexplicably hopeful about finding their own impossible love. You would stand together at the window where it all began, where Seraphiel had first watched you sleep and learned what it meant to want something more than duty, more than perfection, more than the endless sameness of eternal devotion without focus or specificity. The glass still held the traces of the words he had written in dewdrops all those seasons ago, invisible to mortal eyes, but blazing like neon to anyone who knew how to see love made manifest. Do you remember? You would whisper to him, your voice carrying harmonics that made dust motes dance like tiny galaxies. When you thought you were falling, when you believed choosing me meant losing yourself, his laughter would fill dimensions you hadn't known existed, a sound like wind chimes, made of crystallized joy, like the music stars make when they're born. I thought I was sacrificing everything, he would reply, his essence intertwining with yours in patterns that spelled out poetry in languages that had never needed words. But I was really finding everything I had never known I was missing. Together, you had become living proof that love wasn't just an emotion, or a choice, or a chemical reaction in human brains. Love was a fundamental force of creation, capable of bringing new forms of existence into being, capable of making the impossible not just possible, but inevitable. You were the answer to every question lovers had ever asked the universe. Can love really conquer all? Can devotion really move mountains? Can two souls really become one without losing themselves? The answer lived in every moment you spent merged and separate simultaneously, in every heart you touched, in every dream you visited, in every miracle you made possible for those who still believed in magic. You were the love story that rewrote physics, the romance that made reality expand its imagination, the proof that happy endings weren't endings at all, but beginnings disguised as conclusions. Perhaps, in the quiet moments before sleep takes you, you'll remember that love like this exists somewhere in the infinite spaces between what is and what could be. Perhaps you'll dream of wings that shimmer like aurora, of voices that sound like starlight, of hands that hold you across impossible distances. Perhaps you'll wake knowing that somewhere, someone loves you enough to become something new. Sweet dreams, beautiful soul. Like if you believe in impossible love, subscribe for more dreams.